Now adjourned. I call the honourable member for Perth.
Thank you. Last night in Senate estimates, Senator Kim Carr managed against the odds to extract some information on the funding of the Bjorn-Lomborg Australian Consensus Centre. The key of the snippets reluctantly provided was that the decision to provide the $4 million of Commonwealth funding was not a decision to fund a particular university, but it was a decision to fund a methodology, well in advance of any academic institution in this country agreeing to host such a methodology. So a decision was made to fund Dr. Lomborg and his methodology, and Dr. Lomborg was then told to go out and hawk the $4 million to any university that was prepared to provide the program. So again, I stress that when the funding was approved, it had not had any involvement of any university. So how did the government manage to assess this methodology, particularly in light of its cuts to science and a constrained science budget? The methodology involves holding a conference of invited economists, and they do cost-benefit analysis of possible solutions to various global problems and then ranks them in order for money. The consensus conferences have included always climate change as a global issue, but surprisingly, every time the responses to climate change have ranked very, very lowly on their priority. Things like spending on vitamin supplements and promoting global trade are ranked as issues of much higher importance than climate change action. Now, the academics' critique of this methodology is the attending economists systematically undervalue the economic risk of climate change and hence reduce the benefits of climate change action and upscale the costs. Academics have also criticised the selection of panel members that they largely comprise of right-wing climate sceptics. There is also critique of this methodology. But nevertheless, so we have such a critique of this methodology that the Danish government has decided that it would no longer fund the Copenhagen Consensus Centre. Yet we have our government making a decision, presumably at cabinet level, that it was going to fund this methodology. What we want to know is where was the scientific input, where was the analysis done of the value of this methodology, particularly given a time of constrained economic spends. Now, we've heard references made, Senator Birmingham desperately trying to defend the government. He mentioned the Whitlam Centre about 10 times. The Whitlam Centre, established in 2000 with the University of Western Sydney, was a pre-existing organisation that, yes, certainly received some funding from the Rudd government. Likewise, the conversation is quoted as a funding exercise. Definitely, funding was given by the federal Labor government to this collaboration between CSIRO and 4 leading Australian universities to make more accessible the academic writings. And finally, of course, we had the Australian National University's Australian Centre on China and the World. Some of the world's leading sinologists in Australia's national university being funding. There is no comparison to the lack of process that went on in this regard. This is not a question of academic freedom. No one would suggest that we would fund the Flat Earth Institute just because someone ran into the Prime Minister. We need information on what was the process that led to this centre being funded.
Question.